With the Thousand Year Blood War arc fully underway and seemingly utilising characters from all corners of the Bleach universe, myself and many other Bleach fans were curious as to whether or not we would actually ever see Xcution and the Fullbringers make another appearance in the series. Now, they were never the most popular characters, but I really enjoyed them and their style and what they brought to the story as a whole, so I was really hoping they would actually make another appearance. However, I couldn't envision a place for them in the future of the series, especially as the stakes were getting higher and the enemies were getting stronger. However, with the Thousand Year Blood War arc all said and done, we know for a fact that many of the Fullbringers do actually make a reappearance and have a tangible effect on the war and the story as a whole. In this video, we're going to take a look at the role of the Fullbringers, those that actually make an appearance in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and see how they affected the story and what their characters brought to the table. In this video, we are only going to be talking about members of the original Xcution. These are the original characters introduced in the Lost Agent arc, not characters like Chad and Orihime, just members of Xcution. Before we begin, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to hit that button now because you are in the perfect place for Bleach content like this every single week. Don't forget as well to hit the thumbs up button to help with the exposure on YouTube, and don't forget as well to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all of my videos. So to kick things off and dive into the role of the Fullbringers in the Thousand Year Blood War, I think it's pertinent to talk about those that didn't appear in the final arc, because not every single member did, and actually I really like this. Jackie Tristan and Moe Shishigiwara do not appear in the final arc in any capacity whatsoever, and to be honest, this makes a lot of sense. And I like the fact that Kubo didn't feel obligated to include every single Fullbringer just for the sake of it, just because he was including some of them, kind of like he does with the Vizards, where all of them appear in the final arc, but barely any of them really do anything. Instead, for the most part, it actually feels like the Fullbringers are introduced in the Thousand Year Blood War arc on a case-by-case basis in places that make sense for that particular character, and I think that works really well. As for Shishigiwara, I can imagine he probably moves on and does his own thing after the death of Tsukishima, and we know that Jackie loses her Fullbringer and ends up working for Yukio's corporation in Can't For Your Own World, but since that doesn't appear, neither does she. I have to be honest, I thought these characters might appear in Karakura Town if Karakura was ever invaded. I thought those two, Yukio and Riruka, might kind of team up to be some kind of defense force along with some other characters in Karakura, but obviously that never came to pass. Now, regarding the major members of Xcution, we're talking about Ginjo, Kugo, and Tsukishima. Both of these characters are killed at the end of the Lost Agent arc, so going into the final arc, I had no expectation of ever seeing these guys again. And considering they're some of my favourite characters in the series, I would have loved that. So you can imagine my excitement when chapter 518 rolled around and we got our first look at members of Xcution returning for the final arc, and it was actually Ginjo, Tsukishima, and of course Giriko, who was also killed. Considering we were barely 40 chapters into the arc, I was just completely blindsided by this. I did not expect it at all, but it turns out that after their deaths, Ginjo, Tsukishima, and Giriko were rescued by Kukaku Shiba in the Rukongai and taken back to the Shiba household for some training. Thinking about this, it's really cool we got to see this. We basically got to see the cycle of death and rebirth in Bleach in real time, with Ginjo and the others being killed in the Lost Agent arc and coming back as souls, being reborn as souls in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and it's really cool to see. I have to be honest, I would have loved to have had more come from this moment. You know, we know that the Shibas eventually had some kind of connection to Isshin. At the start of the Lost Agent arc, Ginjo was seemingly alluding to some connection with Isshin, but it was never brought up again, unfortunately. And unfortunately, this chapter would linger over me in particular like a spectre throughout the rest of this arc, just really hoping that Ginjo and Tsukishima would show up again at some point and do something in the future, but unfortunately that wasn't to be until right at the very end. I'm also not really sure why Giriko is in this scene. I know that obviously he was killed, so it makes sense for him to be here, but like I said, Kubo was really bringing them back on a case-by-case basis, and it seems like the majority of the Fullbringers that come back are the popular ones. So Giriko sort of shows up here and then is never seen again, That's kind of weird. But that surprise moment is our first look at the Fullbringers in this arc, and then unfortunately we don't see any Fullbringers again for a very long time, way into the war with the Sternritters. By this point, the Soul King has been killed, Ichigo and his friends have gone up to the Royal Palace, faced off against Yhwach, Uryu and the Schutzstaffel, and lost, and been booted out of the Royal Palace itself. Falling downwards, they've landed on one of the Royal Guard's floating cities, and now they have to come up with a way of getting back up there, ideally undetected. Luckily, it turns out that Keisuke Urahara has been planning a contingency method of getting up there for quite some time. You know for a fact that he's been building a base of operations in Hueco Mundo since very early on in this arc, which is a nice through line throughout the entire final arc, which I really enjoy, and he's been working with characters like Grimjo to kind of bring this plan together. It's revealed to us then that they've also been working with Riruka and Yukio, who show up at this moment, and this is a fantastic scene. Honestly, one of my favourite scenes in the Thousand Year Blood War, and you'll know from previous videos of this nature that I've mentioned before that one of my favourite things about the final arc is the way it really successfully brought so many characters together from so many different areas of Bleach. And this whole chapter, I believe, I want to say 625, is living proof of that concept being a complete success, in my opinion. This is the one where Ichigo meets up with Grimjo again, who comes out of a Garganta. Nell is there. Then Riruka and Yukio show up, and it's just this really great coming together of everyone who needs to stop the Quincies. Now, their plan is actually a little complicated, so we're just trying to go through it now. Basically, the way it works is the way they're going to use Riruka and Yukio to get back into the palace. Yoruichi explains to Ichigo the way the world works, essentially. You have Soul Society and the human world, and they are connected by the Dangai. And the Dangai travels through a completely empty space known as the Garganta. And in the Garganta, it's very difficult to keep a solid reishi construct. Things don't keep their form very well in a Garganta. Now, we've seen this in the past when Ichigo has run through it trying to create a steady bridge, and it's just been breaking up all over the place, and it seems like really only the Hollows can use Garganta. Now, it's also revealed that existing within the Garganta are these small pockets of reishi that can keep their form, known as, in the Viz manga, Kyogoku. And I believe they were also originally translated as the Valley of Screams, which up until this point had only made an appearance in the Bleach movie, Memories of Nobody. Now, because these Kyogoku pockets are able to keep their form because they're made up of an entirely different construct to the Garganta itself, Keisuke decided he would take advantage of that and create them almost like a pocket dimension using everyone's powers. So Grimjo, they need Grimjo to create the Garganta in the first place. Riruka then uses her Fullbring to take the Kyogoku and put it inside a box. From that point on, Yukio uses his Fullbring Invaders Must Die to transform that box and the reishi space within into an entirely alternate dimension, and then also build some rails to create this 3D construct which they can then move freely on. It is a little bit complicated, I won't lie, but basically the gist of it is Riruka takes one of these pocket dimensions, sticks it inside a box, Yukio turns the box into a room, and then puts it on some rails, and then they move through the Garganta that Grimjo creates for them. That's essentially the gist of it. But as Ichigo points out, Riruka's ability generally only works on things she finds cute. She can only put things she finds cute into something else. But there's no way she could possibly find a Kyogoku to be cute, so the fact that she's managed to do this for them, she's really kind of pushed herself and gone out of her way. And once again, I just want to reiterate that I love these scenes with Riruka and Yukio. I think they're done really, really well. Yukio has a nice moment where he's controlling the box and taking them back up to the Royal Palace, but he basically says that he's not going to go any further than that. He says that he was press-ganged into doing this in the first place, and he doesn't feel obligated to throw his life away out of desperation like the rest of them do. We have a nice moment with Ganju as well, where he basically turns around to Yukio and says that there's no way you can think like that because every world is on the line here. We all need to work together to defeat the Quincies. But Yukio's like, I don't really care about that sort of thing. He has a very nihilistic worldview, which we already know about the character after he reveals that he was the reason for his parents' suicide, and he seemed to sort of revel in that. It makes sense that he would act the way he does here. But he kind of has a moral fight with Ganju about whether or not they should actually be risking their lives in a fight they're not sure they can win, And, Yukio eventually says, oh, so you don't know that you can win this fight, and it kind of stumps Ganju. But I thought it was a really nice character moment for Yukio, that although he is helping them out, he hasn't changed in the way he views the world and in the way he views himself. He's a very selfish person, and I like that character flaw. I think it works really well. My favourite moment, though, is definitely the aforementioned bit with Riruka, when she basically talks about how she wants to go with them, but Ichigo says, I don't think you should. I think it's going to be too dangerous. For someone who uses their ability in the way you do, you probably shouldn't come to this battle with us. But he does then commend her for really pushing herself to her limit to use her ability on something that's not cute in the first place. And he thanks her for it. And we all know that Riruka likes Ichigo a lot, and she sort of blushes at this. And it's a really, really nice moment that shows, A, how much Ichigo has matured, even since the Lost Agent arc, but also how even the Fullbringers can work together with them for a common goal. I think it's a really nice moment of coming together for all of these characters. We even get a moment that harkens back to the relationship between Orihime and Riruka, when Orihime's feeling really down about the fact that they didn't get enough intel on the Quincies, and how Riruka basically scolds her massively for it. And it is cool seeing Kubo harken back to the Lost Agent arc. Like I said, it wasn't overly popular, but for those of us that did really enjoy it, it's a really nice moment of continuity. But Ichigo says to Riruka and Yukio, basically, you guys need to keep the engine running. If we need to make a quick getaway from here, we'll be doing so using Yukio and Riruka's abilities, and they'll be jumping back in the box and going down the railings again. Now, obviously, Ichigo ends up not taking this route. I kind of assume that the rest of them probably do, though, eventually. But unfortunately, it's not something we ever get to see. And the final time we see the Fullbringers in this arc is right at the end of the story. And at this point, I was getting pretty blue about the fact that I didn't think I was going to see Ginjo and Tsukishima at all, considering we were about 5 chapters from the end at this point. However, Ichigo has been defeated pretty badly by now a godlike Yhwach, who has broken his Zanpakuto toe, completely snapped his Bankai in half in the future, and left him to die. Ichigo is then stabbed through the back, however, and it's revealed that Tsukishima has arrived on the scene with Ginjo and Yukio. So Yukio obviously went back down, got them back in his box, and put them back up again. I would assume they used Kukaku's cannon to fire themselves up to the first city, but again, it's not explained, but that's what I'm assuming. But this is a good moment. It's a good moment. It's not necessarily what I wanted from these characters, but it is a good moment regardless. Basically, Tsukishima stabs Ichigo and reveals to him that he can use Book of the End to essentially insert a new past for Ichigo's Zanpakuto, where his Zanpakuto was never broken. I've done a whole video on this, on how Tsukishima helped Ichigo defeat Yhwach right at the end of the series, if you want to go and check that out. But that's basically the gist of it, is that he uses Book of the End to create a new past that has been unaffected by Yhwach's future sight, and now Ichigo has his sword back for the final battle. Ginjo is there as well, and Ginjo does depressingly little. He basically just shows up to say, because Ichigo says, are you guys really on our side now? And Ginjo's like, we're not on his side, but we are here to repay our debt to you. It's a good moment. It's a nice moment. I just would have loved Ginjo to have done more in this arc. Like I said, in the Fullbring arc stuff, his relationship with Ichigo is so unique, and there's so much to offer there. And what would have been great if he'd gone with Ichigo to face Yhwach in the final battle. I'd have loved that, but because then you could have had Ichigo, Aizen, and Ginjo. So you've got Ichigo and 2 of the previous main villains. That would have been so good, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. Ginjo is just there to basically explain the reasoning behind Tsukishima helping Ichigo out, and unfortunately that's all he does, which it is a shame. But I'm also just grateful that we got to see him return anyway after that tease in 518. So, I'll take it, but I would have loved more, obviously. But it is cool seeing Ichigo get stabbed by Book of the End and it actually be a good thing. And how he gets his sword back, and he gets the glow in his eyes and he's like ready to fight. So if you wanted a reason for the Fullbringers to exist, I don't think it gets any better than helping Ichigo defeat the main villain in the final battle. That's a pretty big achievement. And it's really cool seeing Tsukishima, of all characters, having such a big role to play in the finale. This villain who was so despicable. And who really caused Ichigo serious misery, actually coming around to help him out here, and Ichigo agreeing that their debt has been repaid. again, is a nice bit of continuity. I would have just loved to have more of it. And that is it for the role of the Fullbringers in the 1000 Year Blood War arc. They don't have a big role to play, but unlike, say, the Vizards, at least each role they do have kind of leads to a tangible outcome. You know, Riruka and Yukio's abilities are actively used in a creative way to get them into the Royal Palace again, and Tsukishima actually helps Ichigo defeat the final boss. It's only really Ginjo where I just wish he had done a bit more. You know, being such a major player in the Lost Agent arc, it was nice to see him, even if it was only briefly, but if he'd fought alongside Ichigo, that would have really been something. But that's it, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the role of the Fullbringers in the 1000 Year Blood War arc. Did you enjoy what they brought to the table? Did you think they were well used? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. And would you have liked to have seen Jackie and Shishigawara show up, or do you think it was better that they were kept out of the picture? But until next time, guys, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to hit that button now, and I'll catch you later. See you then.